everybody. King of all WrestleMedia, Gene Jackson here, and welcome to another episode of the Jackson Interaction Podcast. It's been a little bit since we've done one, but hey, we're back again. And today, I'm excited to welcome my guest, first-time guest on this podcast, my good friend, Mr. Bob Anderson. Bob, how are you doing today, sir?
Not too bad, not too bad. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty well. I know by the time this comes out on probably a Monday or Tuesday, it will have been a few days away, but we are fresh off of, as we record this, one day shy of your birthday. So happy birthday, and hope it was a good one.
Not too bad. Had to work, but otherwise, got a nice dinner, had a nice evening. Can't complain.
Hey, when you get to be our age, that's about as good as you can hope for. You know what I mean? You know, it's
Yeah. I woke up, so
yeah. You woke up, you still had that job to go to, and you could afford to have that dinner. So that's
pretty much.
top notch in the old 40s. But anyway,
Hey,
before this turns depressing, before this gets depressing, let's. So some of you may be like, "Hey, I recognize that guy," and you may recognize him as my co-host at one time for the UWF Fury Cast. That was a weekly podcast where we went back and watched, beginning with episode 1. The intention was we were going to watch every episode of the UWF Fury Hour with Herb Abrams, and we bitched out about 12 episodes in. We tapped out and quit. And sorry. But for those of you who are fans of that show, it's got to be a few of you, I suppose. We are still uploading the episodes to the Main Event Comedy YouTube channel. And they are there with no commercials and the sound boosted up a little bit better than what you can hear in other places. So check that out. Subscribe to the channel. We've got all the VHS releases there, the pay-per-views. As of this recording, there's 20-something episodes. I'm going to finish out, get all the episodes that are currently available on the channel, so you can check them out there. And all 12 episodes of the UWF Fury Cast are there. And there are some people who are a fan of that podcast, and they say they were quite entertaining. So check those out and let us know what you think. And if we get enough good feedback, who knows? I may be able to persuade Bob to maybe do those once a month at some point or something. I'm sure I'll never get him to commit to weekly, but who knows? Or maybe I'll at least get him to sit around and do. My hope is, if nothing else, at some point, I would like us to sit down and do a watch along of Beach Brawl and a watch along of the Blackjack Brawl, which is actually way worse than Beach Brawl. Like, Blackjack Brawl was a card where nearly every match was a title match, and when there was like 10 matches, like there was all these titles you'd never even heard from. There was like a UWF Southern States champion and UWF Women's champion. Literally, I know this isn't PC to say, but there was literally a UWF midget title that just appeared out of nowhere on this card, which turned out to be the very last show. And of course, staying true to form for UWF, there were hardly any.
Yeah, I bet I can guess every finish right now without looking at the card.
That's the show that notoriously Mick Foley talked about in his first book, where they had the lumberjack match, which you hear going in, it's like, oh, it's a lumberjack match. There's going to have to be a finish. And he tells the story in the book of him and Snuka start fighting out into the crowd, and Brian Blair's like, "What are you doing? Get back in the ring!" It's like, "It's a double count out," and Blair goes, "It's a lumberjack match," and Foley goes, "It's a Herb Abrams show," and they get both counted out in the lumberjack match, which leaves all the lumberjacks standing there looking like freaking idiots because they had one job, and that's to keep them in the ring, and they did.
You could probably convince me to do a watch along with the two pay-per-views, but as for those weekly shows, nah. I was going to say I'd rather watch modern WWE, but that's probably a lie.
Hey, they weren't 3 hours long at least, so there's that. 40 minutes when you cut the commercials.
They didn't have LA Knight, so they at least have that going for
them.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah, this will turn into a whole different podcast if we steer
down
that trail.
We'll go right away from that.
We may do that eventually. But yeah, so we may get Bob to eventually do a couple of watch-alongs of the UWF pay-per-views. And we may find a couple of random episodes if they have something really fun happen. But just like the most recent episode that premiered on the channel yesterday was the big match they had been building to since the beginning of UWF. You started building the angle with Dr. Death Steve Williams and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. So, again, they had a match, no finish, no winner. They had a lumberjack match, and somehow, that didn't have a clear-cut winner. So they had a steel cage match. Got to have a winner in a cage match, right? You can't have a screw finish in a cage match. Wrong. Terry Gordy interferes. We don't have a winner in the freaking cage match. God help us.
Let me make your day, Gene. Where was Dan Spivey?
He was in my villa in Greece.
There we go.
If you don't know, that is a spot-on impression of John Tolos. And if you don't know who John Tolos is, shame on you. Go back and watch the Fury Hour and the Fury Cast, because he was a top-notch manager, one of Bob's favorites. On Bob's Mount Rushmore, you got Bobby Heenan, you got probably Gary Hart, maybe, I don't know, probably who would be another one up there? Sir Oliver Humperdinck, or somebody like that. But in that fourth spot, most prominently, you would have John Tolos, a.k.a. later the coach in WWF, who briefly managed Mr. Perfect to a loss of the Intercontinental title
for that cup of coffee.
And somebody realized, Vince McMahon's like, where the hell did this guy come from, pal? He's out of here. So the unofficial topic for today's podcast, just because most of what me and you have done together on camera, so to speak, has been related to comedy and wrestling.
It's not porn, then?
No, not on camera. We talk about that privately. Very privately. But, and what's funny is, I say that, we're known for comedy and wrestling because we did, first and foremost, a podcast about Herb Abrams' UWF, but Herb Abrams' UWF was unintentional comedy.
That is
he
true.
Didn't set out to make comedy. And,
but he did a great job.
Me and you had a discussion before we started recording. We were talking about horror movies because, you like horror movies. My wife's a big fan of horror movies. I not so much. And we kind of talked about how a lot of these horror movies, if you go, especially like those silly slashers from the 80s, if you go into them with the attitude of like, hey, I'm fixing to watch a great scary movie, you're going to be disappointed because it's not scary and it's not great. But if you go into it like, all right, this is going to be fun, not necessarily ha ha ha, laugh out loud comedy, but this will be fun. Let me enjoy it for what it is. You can be entertained by it, in one form or another. And that's the same attitude you got to take when you go into watching a Herb Abrams UWF show. This isn't going to be good wrestling, but if I enjoy it for what it is on the surface, you can enjoy it. Now, what we learned, and I'm about to shut up and let you comment on this. What we learned is, yes, that is true. A Herb Abrams show can be enjoyable from a unintentional comedy, unintentional entertainment value. But if you try to watch every episode week in and week out, that wears pretty freaking thin, pretty freaking fast. Am I wrong?
You are not. Like we were talking about, like you said, we were talking about horror, and I said, like, Jason X is one of my favorite Friday the 13th movies. Most of you Friday the 13th fans are going to look at me like I just grew 3 heads when I said that. But, like, it's the death of the franchise. They're all terrible. I mean, maybe the first one is not looked at that way. And like I said, Jason Part 6 is a pretty damn good movie. But, I mean, the Jason in Outer Space movie is freaking hilarious. Like, I mean, it's got some good kills. It's like a really bad Star Wars film with a slasher in it. I mean, what's not to love? It's funny as hell. Like, I mean, it's not like Jason Takes Manhattan or Jason Part 3 with Corey Feldman or the one with the psychic girl. Like, none of those are good freaking films. It's hilarious. What's not to love? And But you're only got to watch that for 90 minutes. Trying to watch 12 weeks of Herb Abrams UWF damn near broke me.
I mean,
And this
it
coming from
started
a
out.
guy that binged 4 years of World Class. And those
Yeah,
shows are
and
terrible. But
yeah, those are looked back on a lot more fondly than from a 30 years ago perspective than when you start in reality, start watching them week in and week out. Because I've tried that too, and I'm like, this ain't as good as I remember it at all. Like, there's no psychology to this whatsoever.
but it does have the problem with the UWF I found was like there was a lot of stuff that was way down here, and then the rest of it was just about right there. Whereas with World Class, it was stuff down here, and then there was a lot of stuff that was up here too. There was Abrams just kind of topped out only about 2 steps above the really low shit. So
Yeah, and so like the first couple of weeks, like it was, from a podcast perspective, and even just me and you talking, not recording, messaging back and forth or talking off the air. Like, no finish, you start getting 8 weeks in and we still haven't seen a freaking clean finish yet. It's like, God damn, like, what are we doing? Like, are we not going to have any clean finishes? And it's like the same batch of jobbers week in and week out. The matches were so freaking repetitive. It was just like Paul Orndorff versus insert jobber here. Throw them around till you end up pile driving them. That's you're going to see that every other week. He's going to come out to "You Can't Touch This" by MC Hammer, which is so weird. But then when you go back and look at it, like if you go back and look at a match listing of all the shows and you look at those main events, I mean, short of Dr. Death and Paul Orndorff to some degree, when you look at who was in those main events, like that was the low level mid card at best of the good shows 5 years prior to that. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
it's not like anybody was jumping up and down to see Billy Jack Haynes or Colonel De Beers or David Sammartino or even Cactus Jack at that point in his
Well,
career.
that was the other thing I was going to bring up. What would you say those shows averaged? 5-6 matches a show?
Yeah.
So we're talking 60 to 72 matches we watched in 12 weeks, and the best match on any of those shows involved David Sammartino. Come on.
Legitimately. And
yeah, I mean, by
Foley,
far
and away was the best thing on
Oh,
there. And
Mick being the best worker doesn't surprise me, with the fact that David Sammartino was in far and away 2 of at least the top 5 best matches.
well,
Yikes.
I mean, Foley in 1990 against David Sammartino, against Chief Jay Strongbow, not
fake Jay Strongbow.
Fake Jay Strongbow was still kind of surprising, because even he'll tell you now that wasn't his heyday exactly. But,
no.
And then it did not even occur to me. It's not something we ever even talked about until we talked about it, was the fact that, what were we, 9 weeks in before the first tag match ever happened?
Something like that.
And I think that was the only one through those 12 weeks. Eventually the Power Twins show up, and then you get Wet and Wild together, because Steve Ray was just starting to become a thing in those last few episodes that we watched. The Wild Thing, Steve Ray. Another brutal aspect, and I'm not gonna lie, and I don't know how, because now when I go and look back on it, but like, I did not realize until I watched him week in and week out on the UWF Fury Hour that Captain Lou Albano is horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, I never thought he was great. I was never a fan, but I didn't ever really just dread his segments, because they were usually pretty sparing back in the day on WWF.
Right.
But holy, when you had those Captain Lou's corners every single week, that got to be some of the hardest, even worse than the repetitive job matches to sit through, because it was just nothing.
I mean, when you're watching the show, like going, well, at least Herb will say something stupid like that. Well, that's the only thing you're looking forward to, is figuring out what stupid shit they were going to say this week. Like, I was sitting there with my notepad going, all right, I got to write down this whole paragraph of what Herb just said.
Yeah.
Because that was the only thing to look forward to.
You're looking forward to, A, what stupid thing is Herb going to say, and B, how's Bruno going to react to said stupid thing?
I mean, yeah, when literally that was the entirety of my notes was the stupid thing Herb said, how bad Bob Orton messed up the Superplex, how annoying Albano was, and whether Cactus was going to be there or not, because he was the only one having remotely entertaining matches.
Because
That's why I tapped out after 12 weeks.
you learned that Orton's not the master of the superplex in this era. Like, they got progressively worse every week. We learned that Brian Blair can apply a Scorpion Deathlock to save his pea-picking life. Holy cow. Oh, and the buzzer! I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, from a Herb standpoint, I think the best / worst / best again Herb dialogue, besides just like some of the really off-putting, semi-pseudo racist things he said, was the whole story of seeing Chief Jay Strongo's TP and Bruno's response to it. You saw his TP. It was big. And him saying he did a rain dance and there was a light drizzle, which I guess all that's borderline racist as well.
Yeah.
But it was a little more innocent than some of the stuff about Ricky Ataki.
Yeah, I mean, if anything has come from that, you and I laughing about War Dance Fever has probably been the best thing to come from the whole 12-week experience. So
exactly, and the fact that we've been able to reference that recently,
right?
And we'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, so I think I'm going to let you lead, but I'm 99.9% sure I know what your response is going to be. But if somebody asks you like, well, do you regret the time y'all spent doing the UWF Fury cast and watching all those shows? I think there was one shining moment that come out of all that. One joke we'll have to look back, and a video that we'll have to play, because I still have it on my hard drive, for the rest of our lives, that come out of that makes that whole experience worthwhile. And I'll defer to you and see if we're talking about the same thing.
Oh, if you're talking about John Tolos, you can go right to hell. But
no, that was my personal favorite. But
oh no, the Billy Jack Haynes video made it all worth it. I mean, we had such a good time coming up with that concept and making it work. And me photoshopping Billy Jack's head onto Bill Bixby's body was, I'm sorry, not even photoshopping. I use Microsoft Paint. I don't have the skills for. But yes, no, that video made my day. And
so that was,
you're
talking about something coming together organically. So here's how this worked, folks, was like, I would upload these episodes to the channel, and then we'd each go watch it. Usually at some point during the week, we would, message back and forth on Facebook, like, oh my gosh, that so-and-so match, or oh my God, Herb said so-and-so, and we compare a few notes like that here and there. And then we would get together to record it. And it wasn't until like the very last episode or two that we started doing any kind of watch along part of it. And initially we just watched it and talked about it. And then a couple episodes in, I started pulling some clips. And so we would talk about it. We'd show a couple clips. We'd have some screen grabs up there. But we pretty quickly, after like a couple of episodes of him being on there, picked up on, what's this with Billy Jack Haynes saying he loves little kids in his promos? Like, what's that about? And then we realized we weren't the only ones that noticed it, because like Bruno mentioned it in a couple of the matches on commentary, like, Billy Jack, he loves the kids. And it's like, is this a rib? Like, what? And this happened in multiple promos. He made this just like offhand. It was almost like it was a bullet point. Right. Like, next week, Colonel Beard, I love the kids. And then just shoehorn it in there, which made it even more uncomfortable about the fact that it felt so forced.
I just had this picture of him driving to the arena in a white van with no windows that said free candy on the side. I mean, that's Portland license plate,
Or somebody's over there producing and they're nudging the guy next to him like, hey, Billy, make sure you mention how you love the kids. Oh, yeah. Okay, I got it. Good call. And he's got that stupid painter's hat on. Oh, my God. So, yeah, Billy Jack turned out to be the high spot. And that's when I kind of knew that it was over and we probably weren't going to last very many more weeks, whenever like Billy Jack left and we looked at the results and like there was no more Billy Jack after that, and we made that touching video with the Lonely Man music. And that's so I got to give Bob 100% credit on that. That was all his idea. Like, you know, we were going to put together something because we realized like, oh, this is Billy Jack's exit from UWF. So we need to acknowledge that somehow. And so he, like you said, he made the Microsoft Paint pictures for it. But yeah, when he said, yeah, find the music from the end of the Incredible Hulk, you know, where he's walking, and I'm like, oh God, that's perfect. So I went on YouTube and I found it, and I pulled the music. And then once we put it together, like, I don't know how many times I watched that thing the day I put it together. I was like, holy shit. Like, there may not be anybody else on God's green earth who find this as entertaining as me and Bob do. But I know I watched it. I don't know how many times I watched it the day I made it, and I sent it to him. I'm sure he watched it a few times. And then we watched it together the day we before we did the show, and then we ran it on the show. And
Hell, you can run it right now if you want.
If I had it, if I'd have thought, I would have had it queued up to run because. But yeah. So that was some of the most, you know, fun moments. And then you just had like I said, I would love, like, so we spent a lot of time plugging Jonathan Plumbaum, this guy who wrote a book about Herb Abrams UWF. So how we even come about doing that podcast is, you know, I had come across VHSs of it back in the day and seen little bits and pieces here and there. And then, of course, you know, Foley talked about it in his book, and you'd hear the stories of how Herb died. And then, of course, that Dark Side of the Ring episode kind of, you know, fired everybody up again, kind of put his name back out there. And then when I saw that somebody was working on the book, I had made a mental note, like, when that comes out, I'm getting that book. I've got to get that book. And then I kind of forgot about it. And I found it. I got it on what's that? You read it, Kindle, downloaded it on my phone, and I mentioned it to you, and you're like, "Yeah, I got the freaking book. Like, I've got the actual book. I've already read it." And then that's how it kind of from there, you know, came into talking about doing a podcast. And so I reached out to the guy that wrote the book and asked him if he wanted to do this, the very podcast we're doing now, the Jackson Interaction thing. I was like, "Hey man, would you want to do an interview about the book?" And he was more than happy to. So I did a podcast with him, had a conversation about it, and you know, when we stopped recording and before we were recording, he was pretty excited that, you know, we were going to do a podcast, and we started a Facebook group. Like, if you are a fan of any of the Abrams stuff, like, we do have the Herb Abrams UWF Universe Facebook group. You can just search for Herb Abrams UWF on Facebook and ask to join the group. We'll put you in there. I post all the episodes now. As I put the episodes up on Facebook, or on YouTube, I put them up on the Facebook group. And I'm hoping other people will put some stuff in there, because I would really like some insight. I haven't heard a lot of insight on the production of the shows, as far as like who exactly was booking when. Like, I know at different times, like, I think Blair had a hand in some of the booking, and I'm sure Sonny Beach probably did at some points, because he seemed to be pretty heavily involved later down the line. But like, I'm just amazed that some of the storylines that did happened the way they did. Like the whole Colonel De Beers and the black referee thing. I mean, it's cringeworthy in 2023, but even back in 1990, it was still pretty damn cringeworthy. Even it was a dated story in 1990, you know, even by the standards of that day. And then when you try to watch it now, you're just like, how the hell did this make it to TV?
And I still can't believe they aired that referee's no-selling Dr. Death's chair shots. That's
that's wild. Absolutely wild. And if for no other reason, that book interview, the guy had an interview in the book with that referee, and you get his response to all that. And it's just freaking mind-blowing that all those years later, afterwards, that guy was still clueless to how close to death he could have and should have been that day. But it, again, it circles back to Herb because it was just Herb throwing somebody in there who had no training, didn't understand wrestling, he didn't know why what he did was wrong because he hadn't been taught.
And it's funny because you've worked indie shows, I've worked indie shows. I've seen that stuff happen in front of 30 people, but not on a nationally televised show.
And I've even seen it happen, similar type things happening on regional shows where they had to edit it out. But the fact that it made it to TV and then later made it to like VHS releases
Right?
is because like I was watching one of the tapes they put out. I've got them sitting over here. I think it was the lumberjack match tape or the steel cage match tape, where they were doing a montage of all the stuff that had happened between Dr. Death and Orndorff. And I remember, plain as day, I was sitting in my apartment in Fulton, Mississippi. And this was probably in, I don't know, 2000, something like that. And I'm just watching that tape. And I'd seen the tape a few times, but it had never caught my eye before. But I'm just watching the tape. And by this point, I had got into wrestling. I'd been involved in wrestling for about a year. So I kind of watched it differently. And that caught my eye. And I was like, wait a minute. I rewound that back and watched it like 3 or 4 times of him hitting this referee over and over with the chair, and he's not selling it. And then he just pops back up. I was like, oh my God. Like, number one, how did that happen? Number two, how is that on this video? Like, how did that not get edited? What? But then later when you learn about Herb and how everything was ran, then you understand like, oh, well, he had college kids editing his shows for him. They didn't know,
Right.
they didn't know that wasn't part of the show and how it was supposed to go down. So, what are they going to do? But it's just a crazy story for me in the end. So I still recommend that book if you get an opportunity to
Oh, yeah.
order it online or actually order the physical copy like Bob has. It's definitely a fun read, and he does a good job, in my opinion, of straddling the fence of not just completely mocking it, but he doesn't treat it like, oh, this was awesome, and we're seriously like heaping praise on it. It's pretty well balanced in that aspect. But he does point out in there, like, he kind of keeps a running tally of, okay, this is how many weeks of no finish. This is, so if you weren't aware of it, by the time you read the book, you are, you're like, because that's kind of the first time that I really noticed. And once we started watching, I was like, oh man, he wasn't even exaggerating. Like,
oh no,
holy, like there is no clean finishes here at all. And it had to all just come down to the fact that, Herb was a money mark guy. People in wrestling understand what that means. He wasn't going to go back there and tell Ken Patera, you're going to lose to Billy Jack. He wasn't going to go back there and tell Steve Williams, you're going to lose to Paul Orndorff, or vice versa. And that's why you needed some kind of veteran to run the dressing room that could go and make those demands and work that shit out. Because that show was never going to be, I mean, I know people don't want to lose and all that dumb aspects of the business. But, I mean, that show was never going to have any success because, I mean,
you can't do that every week.
It got comical whenever they would build up the next match, and you're just like, who cares? Nobody's going to win. I mean, and when you're that many weeks in and it just keeps happening over and over and over, Ivan and Nikita and just down the line, it was.
Yeah, when you could call the finish to the main event the minute they announced it, every time. Like, I mean, I know you can do that occasionally, like when they announce, oh, Flair's going to wrestle, Sam Houston next week. Okay, I know who's going to win that. But, when they announce, Ivan Koloff's going to wrestle Manny Fernandez, you didn't always know. But in UWF, you knew every freaking finish because it was going to be a count out or a DQ or a double DQ. I mean,
and, not to steer this off another direction, but, that was a big issue with some of the Dusty booking and the Crockett booking. Was you knew when Flair defended against so-and-so, it was going to be a Horseman run-in, or it was going to be a draw, or it was going to be a Dusty finish. Rarely was you going to get a finish that was going to be pleasing to everyone. But I say that's a whole other podcast. But even then, though, that wasn't a weekly thing like this show.
Right.
And again, we've talked about, how there really wasn't a a framework to like what was all. I mean, me and you talked about this. I don't know if we talked about it on camera. I'm sure we did at different points, but it's like, what were we building to? Like at that point in the 1990s and even in the 80s, TV, the only purpose a wrestling TV show served was to drive ticket sales to house shows, and then it evolved to driving ticket sales to pay-per-views.
Right.
UWF didn't have house shows, and in the beginning, they didn't have pay-per-views.
They built to nothing.
Yeah, so what were we even doing? Like, what was the point of all this other than just say, hey, I've got a wrestling show?
I think that was the point.
And that never works. I mean, I've seen that before, and apparently I didn't realize that just before Abrams went on Sports Channel, you had that IWA show out of Florida that was much the same thing. It was just endless TV tapings of stars versus jobbers and matches that really weren't going anywhere. And it was a little better structure than what the UWF was, but in the end, it was still just matches for the sake of matches that had no real point. There was no, why would you follow it?
And then, I mean, there was the AWF show with the rounds, and
oh my God, yeah. And I mean, more of the same.
Global was pretty much the same way, but at least they tried to make it feel like things had a point, and they had finishes. And I know we were planning to cover some Global at some point, which is why. But I don't know. It felt like there was zero direction for anything.
Yeah, I mean, because like going into that, I was like, all right, well, we need to cover something because I had mentioned to you off and on for a while, like, hey man, I'd like to do a podcast where we talk about old wrestling, But there's that Booking the Territories podcast where they they cover Smoky Mountain, they cover WCW, and Brian Last and some of those people have podcasts where they do week in and week out Mid-South episodes, and God knows there's 1,000,001 Memphis territory podcasts out there. I was like, well, hell, there's nobody's done, UWF. And then we later talk, nobody's done Global. But then when you get to watch it, you're like, well, fuck, that's why. I mean,
right?
Who wants to listen to somebody talk about some wrestling that wasn't that good? I mean, on a weekly basis. So, and we may do a watch along of some. I mean, that may kind of be our niche eventually. Maybe is once in a blue moon, we'll do a watch along of like I say, those couple of Abrams shows, and we'll do some Global stuff, and we'll figure out an angle for it, because we almost did that before we went into this OWF. We had we had the idea of doing we had a name for it. Pulled out at the last minute because of YouTube issues, and that still it's still going to limit what we can watch, because it's going to have to be things that don't get flagged. And somehow, as I've learned the hard way, Global footage gets pegged as being owned by WWE. I didn't know that WWE owned the Global footage, unless it's somehow tied to the World Class footage, but I don't think it is, because they weren't
I don't
owned
think
by the
they
same
own
people.
Global.
But I've put up 2 or 3 different episodes of Global and a couple of matches from Global, as recently as I've been trying to find this silly stuff to put on the Main Event Comedy YouTube that kind of falls under both comedy and wrestling. So I put up the Bungie match with Stephen Dane and Chaz Taylor, and it got labeled as owned by WWE. But much like our one episode where we put the little clip from Nitro, same deal. It's only banned in the Bhutan and the Afghanistan. It's all them same weird countries. And I don't understand that, why footage that WWE claims to own is not banned in America or Canada,
right?
Or anywhere.
I forgot about us being banned in Bhutan.
Yeah, that was a fun little side note too. We put like a 20-second clip, or not even that long. I think it was like a 10-second clip.
Yeah,
of Steve
Paul Orndorff doing a knee drop.
Paul Orndorff doing his goofy
elbow drop,
dancing elbow drop, and it got flagged and a bunch of shit. But anyway, so going along those lines, I'm going to try to lead us into this without it being too long-winded. So Whitey Jenkins is a wrestling / comedy character. He started out as a wrestling character who evolved into more of a comedy character. And he only existed as a parody of wrestling promoters, is how he came to be to start with. He was a parody of a handful of different wrestling promoters. Started out using it on YouTube for that, and then realized, like, oh, well, this might work on stage. Started using him for stand-up comedy. Got bored during the pandemic and came up with the concept of, hey, I've got all this old footage lying around on VHS tapes of old matches of me wrestling in Mississippi and Alabama in the early or late 90s, I should say. And Whitey Jenkins was always talking about the OWF, which was this fictional wrestling promotion that he ran, and he was always hyping up shows he was putting on, and those were just parodies of deathmatch shows where he was making fun of deathmatch wrestlers and outlaw wrestlers in general. And then I realized, like, well, I got all this old VHS footage. I'm like, I could chop this up, give these guys new names, goofy characters, and then do commentary over it and make OWF into, a real wrestling promotion, for lack of a better word. And so started doing that, usually like 30-minute episodes, and would do the commentary. And at the time, it had to just be Whitey Jenkins by himself because hadn't quite perfected, or at least my internet connection did not allow for Whitey to do commentary with someone else. And I had several people wanting to do it to this day. Couldn't make it work. Me and Dustin Burcham, aka Lester Jones, tried it, and it was just, there was a huge lag. It was just terrible. So did that for a while. Then it kind of went away, and then me and Steve, aka Delbert Jenkins, and Charles Anders started just not as the OWF, but just started doing watch-alongs of us just shitting on bad Alabama indie wrestling and then putting it up on our Patreon page, but then taking clips of it and putting it on Facebook and YouTube and things like that. And started getting a lot of views on them. One clip in particular got like over 70,000 views, which is, I guess, borderline considered viral at this point. And so eventually, somehow, that circled back around to OWF again, and Whitey and Delbert started doing Sunday night's main event. Well, before that, there was a Cheap Heat TV version of Sunday night's main event, and we had someone who owned some of the footage that we used to make fun of make a claim, and got it pulled off of YouTube. So then we just kind of scrapped that idea, and then me and Delbert decided, hey, we'll just go back to using the footage that I own. They can't do shit about that. And we started doing Sunday night's main event with me and Delbert, and sometimes Xanders doing commentary as OWF over some of this footage. And then somebody sent me some footage of some awful backyard stuff. Well, the first thing they sent me was on the side of the road. I guess you can't even call it backyard. It was on the side of the road somewhere in Tennessee. And it was a guy in the footage that I recognized that I actually had wrestled years ago and came out and assaulted with a chair at one point years ago. And
should have hit him harder.
Should have. I won't tell that here. We'll talk about that off here. So anyway, we put that up, and Bob saw it and reached out and was like, dude, that's funny. Like, that's some awful ass wrestling. Like, I would love to be involved in some of that. And I was like, okay. And from him reaching out and telling me that, eventually, I won't tell the whole story and go around the world, but that eventually evolved into what would become OWF Worldwide Wrestling, which became Whitey Jenkins and Broadcast Bob Anderson doing a weekly show. And it's a combination of some of the footage that I own that I've used in the past and some that I never got around to yet, along with some of that backyard stuff, and then other random stuff that Bob somehow manages to find on YouTube, and I don't know how, and I don't ask exactly how he comes across it. But we take that and make a weekly show out of it, and it's starting to gain a little bit of traction. We've got the Outlaw Wrestling Network YouTube channel is up to 50 something subscribers now, which that doesn't sound impressive, but the episodes are up, starting to get up over 100. Some are up over 200, and I've told you the story from my perspective, but from your side of the coin, kind of tell me, like, as far as seeing that video in your mind, like what you thought the potential was of doing something with all that.
Well, yeah, we had talked about doing, like you were saying, something similar a long time ago. And then, yeah, when that first video of the 4 guys on the side of the road in front of the gas station went up, I laughed my ass off. And I was like, yeah, I'd always kind of wanted to do something similar to this because years ago, I don't know, what Extreme Warfare Revenge is. I don't know if everyone else does. It's a booking simulator video game. And on their forums years ago, there was a board member on the message forum that claimed to be a professional wrestler, and everybody was suspicious of that. And then one day he posted a match, and he was indeed a professional wrestler, but I'm going to break the swearing barrier here. It was fucking terrible. And another guy on the message board took and pretty much did what we were doing and recorded himself doing commentary over it, just in like this completely over exaggerated, excited voice about how it was the greatest match he'd ever seen. And like every move that was hit, he sold it like, it was like, Vince McMahon on his most overhyped commentary. Oh, that's the greatest thing I've ever. And like everyone on the board was popping for this guy, and completely, the guy that was wrestling in the match probably felt this big, but it was the funniest shit I'd ever seen. And so ever since I saw that 15 years ago, I was like, God, I'd love to do something like that. And then when that popped up from yours, I was like, we got to do this. And yeah, that match, like I said, the Dwut match or whatever, was hysterical. And I've been wanting to do that match over again. And spoiler, we're going to.
It's coming.
Yeah. So, and then you had all the footage you had, and then some of the footage is a group that I actually was a ring announcer for.
True, yeah.
12, 15 years ago. And I found their channel still existed on YouTube, thank God. So yeah, we've been taking from them, and some of it's just random searching on the internet, or for one thing leads you to something else, and there's a lot of garbage out there.
Oh my God, more than there is anything good. One thing I failed to mention, though, if I can back up for just a minute. So when me and as Gene and Charles and more or less Steve, although he, besides wrestling as Steve Pleasing or managing as Steve Pleasing, he pretty much calls himself Delbert on everything else. When we were doing those voiceovers of those Alabama shows on YouTube, we were just dunking on everything and just trashing it and making fun of it and everything. And the one thing I did say whenever we pivoted to OWF, to the Sunday Night's Main Event, right before you came on board, I told Steve, I said, look, it's easy to get on here and just shit talk this bad wrestling and just point out the obvious of how bad it is. And yeah, that's getting over in the clips. I said, but to me, especially if we're going to call this the OWF and we're presenting this as our wrestling, it's more fun if we try to put it over and ignore how bad it is and try to cover up how bad it is. Like, and he agreed, and that's kind of what we started doing, or at least moving in that direction. And so whenever you hit me up, and I was like, yeah, man, I'm kind of thinking the same thing. I was like, but here's what I think about, and you agreed, and you told me about that video that you just told everyone about. Like, yeah, that's what he did in that video. Like, he's putting it over. Like, the video buries itself. Like, you
Exactly.
don't have to tell people how off the wrestling is. The wrestling speaks for itself.
Exactly.
But
And
you, as the overexcited hype man for this terrible wrestling, that's the comedy. Because if not, you're just being a shithead that's making fun of something that's already bad. Now, granted, there's moments now where I'll catch myself after it's over with, and I'll think, did I go too far the other way in that match? Or I think we've done a pretty good job balancing that, but I do find it hard sometimes. Like, for instance, in the show that debuted, I think this past Thursday, I put all this shit up so early and edited it so long ago. I have trouble keeping up with what came out when, but I'm pretty sure this came out this week, right? The Coastal Cage combat thing. I know you were concerned, like, as soon as we got done recording, and we're both still laughing, and I'm hurting from laughing, you immediately said, maybe we need to re-record that. And I was like, no, we're not re-recording that. And you're like, I don't know. We were kind of, I was laughing and was kind of making fun of it. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And then I went back and watched it. And then I was like, no, we're definitely not re-recording that. And then I sent it to a couple of buddies of mine. And they were like, no, that made it. Like, that, you guys being so tickled at how absurd. Because they were like, everything about that situation was absurd. Like, it's a cage match with a guy who's clearly nearly 80 years old and a guy who clearly has no business being anywhere near a wrestling ring. And they're fighting outside the cage because you later find out, and if you're watching this right now and you've watched episode, what is that? 8, episode 8. Yeah. If you didn't go past the credits and watch the Easter egg at the end, go back and watch that. I feel like I need to reshare it and put that in the thing, stick around to the end. There's actually an Easter egg at the end of that video where Jeremiah Junkins, we'll just call him by his OWF name, where Jeremiah Junkins comes out to the ring and the cameraman's close enough that you see him look up at the door of the cage, look to the cameraman and go, I ain't going to fit. I can't fit in the cage. We're going to fight out here. And I didn't catch that the first time I watched the video. I didn't catch it. I didn't catch that until I was editing the final cut of the video. And I messaged Bob. I go, holy shit. Like, Chick ZBL.
Everyone knows who he is.
Chick Donovan. When Chick Donovan came out to the ring for that match, he didn't know they were about to have a match on the floor. Like, Cornbread, Jeremiah Junkins, Cornbread, this ring name, realizes when he gets out there, oh, I'm not going to fit in the cage. So he tells the cameraman and the referee, who now goes around and tells Donovan as he's coming out to the cage, hey, he can't fit. Y'all are going to have a cage match on the floor. And so on the fly, that's what they come up with, is him rolling around on the floor, getting him in a leg. I use this term loosely as he applied the hold. A leg lock, to which he ends up tapping out to on the floor, and Chick Donovan wins this cage match on the floor. And this was like the main event of this show. So, like, can you imagine if you went and went to a show which, number one, was all cage matches? That wasn't just our gimmick on the show. That was the gimmick of the actual show. And the main match, they never got inside the cage, and it ended with the guy giving up out on the floor. I mean, sure my buddy was like, you guys, like, there was no putting that over. Like, the fact that you guys were genuinely tickled. And I go, well, we were genuinely tickled because we're figuring all this out as we're watching it. I was like, and if we had realized as we were watching it that the reason, because I didn't know, I assumed until that I caught him saying that to the cameraman as I was editing it, I thought, and I think I even told you this when we picked the match to use, I thought Chick couldn't get up the steps to get up into the cage. Is maybe why because that's why, the last year or two of Abdullah the Butcher's career, every match he had was on the floor because he couldn't get up into the ring.
Right.
So he'd have all these brawls on the floor. But then I thought, well, wait a minute, though, because even if the cage wasn't there, Chick would have had to get up the stairs and get into the ring. So that doesn't really make sense. And then whenever I saw that in the video, and he's like, hey, man, I ain't going to fit in there. And I sent that message to you. I clipped it, sent it to you, and you watched it, and you're like, that's got to be an Easter egg, dude. You got to put that in there somewhere. So we tacked it on to the end. And like I said, I think I'm going to go back and reshare it with a thing saying, hey, if you if you've seen this, if you didn't watch past the credits, go back and watch this, because that to me is the most hilarious thing we've seen so far. And I don't know that we'll top it. We may have hit the pinnacle in episode 8. I don't know.
I've got a few matches in line.
A few tricks up your sleeve.
So I want to say two things. First of all, you were talking about, I think all 17 people in attendance probably had already gotten their money's worth that night. So
as much as they were going to get.
Exactly. And as for, trying to make it in versus not shitting on it, like, I think there are times where we can throw in little lines here and there. Like the one match we had where the overweight guy, sort of dressed as Kamala, was fighting the dancing hillbilly in the hardcore match. Like at the one point where he obviously goes under the ring to Blade. Like when we call out certain spots like that, like, yes, we're shitting on it, and yes, we're calling it. Like, I think there's room. Like when you're calling the whole thing, like, oh my god, he's really busted about, and then you throw in little bits like, oh, he's going under the ring to Blade. Like everybody knows it. Like I think you can, if you go like 90% calling it straight and 10% throwing in little like jabs at it, I don't think those hurt. If you're at 100% just being an asshole,
it wears thin.
Exactly.
It wears thin. I think it's a good balance, and like you say, I think that makes it fun. Those 10%, when it's so bad or so blatant that you have to acknowledge it, it makes it funny to the viewers. They're like, yeah, they couldn't even try to cover that up. That was just like too damn obvious.
Like the tag match on episode 5 with the super black ninja and the green like, I mean, when they're just standing there staring at each other, waiting for the referee to tell them the next spot, there's not a whole lot we can do other than just make fun of how bad it is. But when they're legitimately trying, and it's just like, that's the thing. Like there may be people that see this show and like, man, these guys are assholes making fun of this. Like, I give all of those people credit for even getting in the ring and trying. My fat ass couldn't do it. Like, I know you did, and that's awesome. But like I'm not. We're having fun making fun of how absurd
but there's a reason,
stuff is. But
there's a reason that Chuck the Truck is a character on this show. Like, I acknowledge that most of the matches I did weren't good. And then if people say, well, hey, look at you making fun of people, like, I put my own matches on here and make fun of them. You are putting up shows that you ring announce and you are involved in, and you're making fun of them. So, I mean, it's like we're making fun of ourselves too. So it's not like we're going, hey, look at these idiots. It's just like, it is what it is. It's all in good fun. And one thing I do want people to kind of understand is, like, it's not like we're just snatching up this shit off the internet and this is easy. Like, I want to kind of walk people through kind of quickly. We don't have a lot of time left. The whole process, like how much time it takes us to put out a 20-minute episode of OWF Worldwide Wrestling, because this shit doesn't just happen by itself. So, it starts with, and some of them, like I say, some of those matches are things that I have on my hard drive. But let's just say more recently, Bob finds some matches. Usually he'll send them over to me and go, hey, what do you think of this? Or he'll put them in an email, and I'll get an email, and I'll kind of skim through them. But, there's the vetting process of him. So for every one, because me and you hadn't even talked about this. For every one match that you end up using on the show, how many other matches have you gone through? Even if it's just for a few minutes, but how many other matches have you gone through that you don't use, that you wouldn't have watched for fun? So now this is time you've had to spend watching a bunch of shit that's not usable.
Oh, a lot. I'm not, and please, I don't want people to think we're complaining, but yeah, just to get an idea, like, there's a guy coming up in our shows. I won't spoil his name yet, but there was a channel, or the channel that I found his matches on probably had over 200 different videos on it. And I think after going through at least 150 of those, I came away with 7 usable matches.
Yeah. And no, we're not complaining. I just want people to understand that, like, we're putting work into this in hopes of making this entertaining for people and enjoyable. And it's not like we're shitting on people's entire body of work. Like, out of 100 and something matches, we found 7 we can have fun.
Yeah, I was going through most of them going, this is too good. Oh, these are, these guys know how to work, or they're not screwing, like, Yeah, sadly, I mean, it does seem like we're picking on people because we're going through looking for bad stuff. But I mean, that's the thing. Like a lot of these guys were, he out of 150 matches, he had 7 of them where I could go, well, that wasn't really that great. We can kind of have some fun with that one.
Right.
Not saying he's a bad worker, just everybody has a bad night. I mean, God, look at episode 1 of our show. I was terrible on it. Not saying I'm good now, but I'm embarrassed by that one, and I wish you'd let me re-record it, but you won't.
To this day, we're how many episodes in, and he's still to this day will be like, let's re-record that first one. Like, it's out there. It's been out there. It's got 100-something views or 200 or whatever it is.
But yeah, so yeah, no, it takes a while to find stuff that works and stuff that's bad enough or good enough, depending on how you look at it, to go to the show. And before we go on, I really don't think that you get enough credit. Like all the technical shit that's done on this show, like if you weren't here, it wouldn't get done because I have no idea how to do any of that.
I mean, it's kind of surprising. Like, I don't think, I mean, I got a lot to learn, and it could look a lot better than what it is. And some of it's just like happy accidents, like, well, this is supposed to be a shitty outlaw show, so it shouldn't look too good. And I've had a couple people tell me, like, y'all are getting a little, some of y'all's editing is getting a little better than what it needs to be for what you're trying to do. And I'm like, well, but it's all self-taught. Like I started editing videos for my YouTube channel for these podcasts and stuff a few years ago. And this is just stuff I've figured out over time. And really where I started getting a little better at it was those UWF podcasts, going into the Fury Hour episodes and trying to pick out clips and cut the commercials and splice it together to where it didn't look so jump cutty, and putting in transitions and all this kind of shit. And it's a lot more time consuming than people realize. But and again, we're not looking for a pat on the back for any of it or anything. It's just like, I just hope people understand, like, look, we're not just like, hey, let's spend an hour shitting on this stuff and throw it on the internet and see what happens. Like, you people would be probably shocked and amazed at like how much goes into a lot of this shit, like kicking names back and forth, and what do you think of this, and and there's stuff, because like I'm a guy, like, and it's not because, I mean, mostly just because I'm lazy, is like I'll record it once and we're just fucking using it. So there's a lot of things that Bob will fight me on, like, no, we gotta re-record this, we gotta re-edit this, and I'm like, all right, whatever. Like, this is all dumb, like, hobby shit, but we'll go back and redo it because he wants it to be good. Like, he wants it, to be entertaining. And, we're apparently he's right about a lot of it, because, we're gaining followers, we're gaining views, and, they're starting to get comments on some of the videos and stuff like that. So.
Coming up with highly intellectual names like King Kong Voorhees and the Cox Brothers takes time.
Yeah, well, notice he uses 2 examples of shit that I made up. He's not.
Oh, fucking hell!
He's not burying any of his names, but.
Oh, god damn it! Fine. What did I come up with? I don't fucking remember.
Most everything besides what was on the Wrestle War episode.
Fine. Michael P.S. Myers.
Yeah, the Halloween Birds is definitely an example.
That is a Bob creation.
A Bob creation. Well, and something else. Like, so.
And don't forget.
Whenever I was doing this alone, like, I would say that, the OWF's made up of all these different promotions, and sometimes I would acknowledge where they were at. Most of the times I didn't say anything about it, but like, whenever you hear at the beginning of a match that, we're at the Columbus Outlaw Combat from Columbus, Ohio, that's all Bob. He comes up with the venue names, the promotion names, and I've got to give him credit for one, because I never would have been able to come up with this. So we had a match. I found the match online a long time ago, where this little kid's wrestling. It's over in England, and this little kid's having a match.
Wait, has that one come out yet?
Yes, I believe.
What episode number is that?
Episode 9. So this will be.
That has not come out yet. Oh yeah, okay. Just make sure this comes out afterwards.
So in next week's episode, a good while back, I had found a match where this little kid's having a match. It's over in England, and I forgot I had it, and I found it on my hard drive, and so I threw it into the matches, and I had already named the Kid Vicious, and I had named the other wrestler Jay Swiss because in EPW, where me and the Violent Gentleman used to work, and my good buddy Neil Taylor promotes it, and my good friend Gary Wooldridge books it, they have a wrestler named K Swiss, and this guy looks like a smaller version of K Swiss. Like he has the same beard, same haircut. He looks very much like K Swiss, so I named him J Swiss just as a rib. So if anybody from EPW watches the show, especially K Swiss, then they'll get it. But so what happens is we compile a list of matches, however that comes together, and it goes to Bob. And then Bob sends me an email where he has now named the promotion. He's named, the location of where the promotion is. He usually helps make up the ridiculous names for the titles a lot of times, because that was something I started back when it was just me. It was like I would have the, hardcore X Division junior television title or whatever the fuck. So Kid Vicious has a belt when he comes out. So Bob made him the junior division champion, and he's the England's Immaculate Elite International Outlaws champion from Twickenham, England. So as I'm reading this email, I'm going through and I was like, Jesus Christ, like what a name. Like this is the longest name I've seen him do. And then I realized when I get to the next line, that now makes Kid Vicious the EIEIO junior division champion. Now that's some dedication, folks, to come up with a name that long just to get that joke with those initials. That is a dedicated. That's a dedicated man right there. So props for that.
And the other thing people don't realize is that we're actually losing money on this whole venture because we got to pay that pompous British prick that does the hotline and that smiley glad hands that does the fucking voiceovers for the house shows. So.
Oh yeah, and then we got to have producer Smokey help put all this together, and Whitey Jenkins is a pain in the ass to deal with in general. And you get to do the show with him every week.
Yeah.
I have to come let him do it in my room, obviously, because it's the same background behind us. So figure that out.
Yeah, I gotta keep him from saying shit on the air that'll get us thrown off of YouTube and get me witch hunted on the internet. So
that's true. But anyway, we're having fun doing it. We hope people are having fun watching it, and we're hoping to continue to get more subscribers to the YouTube channel and keep, building up the viewers. And YouTube is a very weird platform that I'm still figuring out. I've been watching videos lately. The algorithm is quite the mystery of what factors it figures in before it starts suggesting and pushing things out to people at the end of other videos. How long people watch is a big factor in what it suggests and how it suggests and where it suggests and all these types of things. And so I'm trying to do some studying on that. And I know this isn't anything. I mean, this is just a project of something that we're doing because we think we have fun doing it, and we think other people, will enjoy it because it's dumb shit we enjoy. So maybe other people who enjoy the dumb shit we like will enjoy it too, because it's not really anything we're ever going to make any money on because we don't own most of the footage. And so if he's watching it right now, I do want to thank John Rare. John Rare shoots most of the footage of when you see people like, Cornbread / Jeremiah Junkins, the ZBL footage, the Clifford the Little Red Wrestler, Doink the Clown, the Halloween Birds, all those guys are from various Alabama promotions that John Rare shoots the footage. And he's aware that we use it. He's cool with it. I put it, I mentioned him in the credits. And I actually reached out to him like, hey, are you cool with us using this? And he's good with it. So we do appreciate that. The other stuff, we're just kind of jacking it and crossing our fingers and hoping nobody notices. Because, I had a YouTube channel that I had for 14 years, 15 years that had hundreds upon hundreds of videos on it. It had a lot of irreplaceable shit that I had recorded years ago that didn't exist anywhere else, which is stupid on my part. I should have had it on hard drives, but I didn't. And now it's gone forever because the YouTube channel got pulled because of putting up like Japanese wrestling footage back when it was just cheap heat TV. It wasn't main event comedy or whatever. So we're trying really hard this time around. So some of this footage, we kind of dip our toe in the water and put it out there and go, this is going to be a problem. I've had people ask me like, so like, okay, we get what you're trying to do. You're trying to be funny, but like, what the hell are y'all doing with some of these commercials? Like, what's supposed to be funny about some of these commercials? Well, some of them, they're only funny to us. Some of it, we do it to pop particular friends of ours, or friends of, some of them are to pop Bob's friends, some of them are to pop my friends, some of them just pop us, and we don't care if it pops anybody else. And so we found this goofy premise of Whitey and Bob have won a storage unit in a auction, and they have all these CDs and clappers and all this old stuff in it, and that's why they run these commercials, because they're hoping to unload some of it. Because if not, what other reason would we have for running some of the commercials we do? But it's, we think it's fun.
I remember most of the CD commercials are just all shit. I remember like watching ECW at 3 a.m. in 1996, and all of a sudden the Pure Moods commercial would come on, and I'd be like, oh, I needed to hear some Enya at 3 a.m.
Yeah, and then you just heard White Zombie for the last.
Exactly. And then the Classical Thunder commercial was always a mystery to me, because, here it was like 1995. We're in the middle of like the grunge revolution. Here I am still wearing flannel in 2023. But like, everyone's listening to Nirvana and Pearl Jam, and they're like, you know what? We need to sell some fucking Beethoven. But how are we going to do it? We're going to be like, Classical Thunder, all the major hits. And I'm like, oh, like the grunge kids are going to be like, oh, yeah, I want to hear that.
I didn't even know that existed, but now that I do.
Yeah, like 45-year-old Bob would totally own that album, but 17-year-old Bob was like, what the fuck is this?
And I'm sorry, if you are watching and you can't figure out why a show featuring Whitey Jenkins would have a commercial for Freedom Rock, then you're just not paying attention.
Turn it up, man.
Hey, man, was that Freedom Rock? Turn it up, man. And there's another commercial that's finally going to be coming up soon of a CD that's really Whitey Jenkins centric that we've been holding in our back pocket for a while. So looking forward to that. And so we're trying to keep mixing it up, because like I say, some of them just exist for those reasons of just like, nostalgia for us personally, because those commercials came on when we watched wrestling back in the day.
Some of them were just funny.
Then some are just funny. Because 1 week you're like, all right, so they're just showing nostalgia commercials when you see Freedom Rock. But then Butt Drugs comes on, and you're like, what the hell is this?
And then some of them are just like when the Mr. Bucket commercial comes on, and you're like, wow, there's a kid's toy that says put your balls in my mouth. I mean,
exactly.
What the fuck?
And then, you got Doink and Clifford the Little Red Wrestler, and it breaks to a commercial where this, guy's telling his kid to stay off drugs and asking where he learned about drugs, and I learned them from you, Dad. I'm like, I'm sure Doink lived that out in his day. I'm quite sure.
If I'm telling you the truth, the reason we ran that commercial is because for years, like my dad and I would laugh our asses off at that commercial. And then anytime my mother would get pissed off at me and it was something that my dad had previously done in his life, he'd look at me and be like, where'd you learn that, son? And I'd be like, I learned it from watching you, Dad. And my mom would be like, would you two stop that shit?
No. We're mad at him.
Exactly. So my dad has started watching our show every week with me, and so I put that in there just to pop my dad. So
see, that's fun. There's certain people now that I know watch it, specific, like your dad for one. That's fun, and I know certain friends of mine that are watching it, so I keep that in the back of my head. A lot of the stuff, I'm like, even if it's going to pop one person, then
exactly,
hey, it's worth it,
Oh, that's the Freedom Rock commercial. That's my buddy Chris's favorite commercial in the whole world. So I was like, I know we got to put that in there. And then we got to thank my buddy Scott for putting that June Ree commercial out there that's been stuck in your head for 2 months.
Okay, Scott, I both simultaneously love you and hate you for that commercial, because, dude, that's hilarious. As of now, it's the favorite one we've ever run, and I don't know what's going to top it. But at the same time, I could choke your eyes out, because literally, dude, I walked around for 2 weeks. I'd be walking across, so I run an outdoor store, and I'd be outside going to move a lawnmower, and I'd be like, self-defense, and I'd be like, oh, stop it. And then I'm on the lawnmower pulling around back, nobody bothers me, and of course I do it in the offensive accent, because that's the commercial, right?
I while we're
But
doing it, I
then, of
also
course,
want to
there's
thank
that
Scott for.
weird ass, like very weird dude dressed up like a grandma singing commercial. That's
I don't.
strictly nostalgia for you. I mean, it's funny, weird, but it's also because it's like when I found
I
out you've seen those your entire life, it's like,
Yeah, I don't think that's run yet, but when it does, yes, there's a lady dressed like a grandma. Those literally ran where I lived from the time I was old enough to remember TV until I probably moved away, like weekly, daily, nonstop, and they're disturbing as hell.
yeah, be looking
Uh,
for that very
while
soon.
we're thanking Scott, I want to thank Scott for finding the Bones channel for us. People will know what that means later, but if he hadn't found that,
Yes,
we wouldn't have our new favorite character. So,
we've been collecting videos from that channel, so good job.
but and then I also
And hey, that's another thing too. If you're watching this right now, like if you know of some bad wrestling like
yes,
channels that we can mine for bad wrestling, send it our way. Or if there's an old commercial that you find funny, or you think we may find funny, or it just fits the bill,
oh yeah,
send either one of us a link to it, and we will get it. You know, we'll work it in. It may take a little while because we've got like a stockpile of stuff, but it'll work its way in eventually,
oh yeah,
guaranteed. Because we
especially
are
the bad
always looking
wrestling.
for more stuff. Yeah, especially the bad wrestling, because you burn through the footage, you know, quicker than you realize doing, you know, 2 to 3 matches a week every week. And we're going to try to do some more of the home video things where, you know, they're 30 minutes to an hour here and there. We can't do a lot of those because then you're going to burn through a lot
Right,
of footage in one sitting.
they're good for the longer
Um,
matches, but
yeah, because there's some matches you just can't justify clipping, but you can't justify, you know, a 20-minute, 17-minute match and a 20-minute episode of worldwide wrestling. So
I think I have most of our next home video release ready, but we're always looking for more. So
I'm excited about the headliner for that one, and that
do we
should
want
be
to
fun.
spoil it here?
Nah, we'll make
All
them
right,
wait. We'll make
all
them
right,
wait. But if you're watching this, we appreciate it, and if you've been checking out any or all of the worldwide episodes, we do appreciate it, and we'd really appreciate it if you'd share them and tell people about them,
yes,
because that's where we're picking up steam is putting them on like, you know, message boards and different places like that, and people aren't coming back and commenting necessarily, which I wish they would, but
yeah. We
you
want
see
feedback,
the
good or
view,
bad.
going up. Yeah, I mean, if you got criticisms, hit us with it. I mean, you're not going to hurt our feelings, and you know, if it's something, you
And
know,
if you
that,
do, we'll swear at you.
yeah, if we think we can improve it, we'll use that to improve it. If not, we'll have some passive aggressive ask the host question based
Or
on your based on your feedback.
yeah, or we'll bury you on
We'll
the
take
hotline. You
we'll
know.
take a shot at you on the hotline or in the ask the host, even in the commentary. So you know you may get mentioned somewhere along the way. And there, your name may become a wrestler's name on there. You never know. But
Yeah, yeah. If you really want to be assholes to us, you may get turned into a jobber. So it's a good way to get on the show.
and hey, just ask Dave Meltzer. There's no bigger honor than to have a jobber named after you, just like he did on the Fury Hour back in the day. Little Davey
Oh, way
Meltzer
to
took
tie
some.
that shit together.
Yeah, full circle, baby. Poor Davey Meltzer took some beatings on the old Fury Hour back in the day. Got a damn dirt sheet shoved in his mouth after a win, lost to Dr. Death. But yeah, since we have come full circle and we're a little over the hour time limit, we're going to wrap this one up. But um, I've been wanting to get Bob on just a straight up podcast. Like I say, you know, we did the Fury Hour thing, the Fury Cast, and all this different stuff. But I've been wanting to get Bob on a podcast because, I mean, how me and him come about being friends is we're wrestling fans. You know, we got to know each other on like a wrestling chat board and stuff, and we share a lot of the same views, and we have some things we disagree about, which to me makes for interesting conversations. So we're going to try to have him on some more in the future. Like I said, we're going to try to do some watch alongs of different things. If you have suggestions for things that we could maybe do a watch along about or do a podcast discussing, again, send them my way, genejackson95gmail.com. Always looking for new content ideas. And again, especially if you got some bad wrestling for OWF, definitely send that our way. Bob, I know you have the Broadcast Bob Anderson Facebook page for the Broadcast Bob Anderson character. I'm going to have to try to figure out how to tell you how to go in and change the ID for that. So it'll actually be like Bob Anderson rather than like Facebook ID 0745433 blah blah blah. That's why I can't tag you in anything. I keep forgetting to bring that up. But you can search for Broadcast Bob Anderson and you'll come up with his page. You can follow it. All things OWF, including Bob's page, including the YouTube channel, all that. If you go to officialowf.com, that is a real functioning website that has links to the YouTube channel, Bob's page, the OWF Facebook page, my page. Pretty much everything can be found there, or you can go to themaineventcomedy.com. There's links there as well. That is another kind of fun wrinkle to all this. Is, some of this stuff's just for show. It's just for fun. The web page is a real web page, and most of the t-shirts we show you, those are real. You can get most any of the t-shirts you see are actual real t-shirts. They're available. You can buy them. And that's when I'm really going to feel like we've accomplished something. Is when we start selling, when there's somebody walking around wearing a Worldwide shirt or I broke Yahoo's arm or something like that. That's going to be pretty exciting.
That hasn't happened yet.
Hasn't happened yet, but make it happen, folks. I made here's a little fun behind the scenes story. When I was making some of these shirts, I made a Broadcast Bob Anderson shirt and then just sent it to Bob, and he flipped and he's like, I can't have that. What if somebody, and this is a pretty big leap. Now keep in mind, we haven't sold any of these t-shirts and but the first thing went to his mind is like, what if my boss is in Walmart and sees somebody wearing this shirt? So there was going to be such a run on Broadcast Bob Anderson shirts that people were going to be out in Walmart. His boss is going to see it. It's not like, it's anything offensive. It wasn't like it's a picture of him with his dick out or something. So it's not like his boss, he would have got to work Monday and he'd be like, Jesus Christ, I seen a guy with a t-shirt on. It would have just been like, what the fuck? Who's Broadcast Bob? And they're like, that was some other bald dude with a beard. And then his boss has been like, oh yeah, okay, I believe that. But so we immediately pulled it from the shelves. It's not available. We'd probably be about 12 deep on sales for those right now if we'd have been allowed to leave them up. But unfortunately, we were not. But maybe somewhere down the road we'll figure out a way to talk Bob into letting us sell a Broadcast Bob shirt, and all the fans can buy the shirt, as Kevin Nash would say.
I hate you.
All right, folks. As we've known in the past, it's not time to end the podcast until Bob says he hates me. Now that he has, just like on the old UWF podcast, now that I've officially made Bob hate me, we can end it, and then we'll spend the next couple of months talking him into doing another one, and eventually we'll talk him into doing another one. And like I said, it may just be a watch along of Beach Brawl. It's not that bad. Beach Brawl is not terrible. It's not good. Don't get me wrong. But Beach Brawl is not as bad as Blackjack Brawl. Blackjack Brawl is horrible.
Can we just rewatch Doink versus Clifford the Little Red Wrestler instead?
We may. We may. But again, folks, get ready. That match that we alluded to that brought Bob on board to begin with will be coming up soon. That is in the next batch of episodes that'll be getting recorded. So before long,
I believe it'll be episode 13.
That's right. So remember, folks, officialowf.com. The t-shirts are real. Unfortunately, the wrestling figures are not yet.
Ooh.
Stay tuned.